Hi everyone, welcome back to our series on our tour of Devon and Cornwall. One of the key agendas of our tour was going to see some ancient stones, inscribed stones of great importance to our antiquity in Britain, especially when we're looking for Colburn ciphers, and also just generally stones which are inscribed by Britons and ancient people.
Yeah, and hard physical records of people who are contested by some academics to even have existed.
Yeah.
So it's these are contemporary records, which is really important, isn't it?
Hugely important source for that then is that they're not as celebrated and brought to the fore as maybe they should be as primary sources or sources which we can garner a lot from.
Yeah, and or even just as as monuments, these are pretty, save for some Roman inscriptions. This is pretty much the oldest writing that you get in Britain.
Yeah,
they are 1,500 years old. They're some of the oldest. They are the oldest Christian monuments we have in Britain, and yet most people hardly even know they exist. They're just sort of examples of local curiosities rather than a really important record of a time that we claim to know very little about. But the evidence is just sat there, waiting to be evaluated. So I took Adam to somewhere where I visited previously. My local town, Tavistock, turns out has got 3 inscribed stones from the 5th and 6th centuries. And this is something I knew nothing about, and I never would have looked into it if it wasn't for Ross Broadstock and Britain's Hidden History. And I just couldn't believe it that these things were there. They're currently in a private garden in the Vicar's garden. I made arrangements to go and see him, and I knew when Adam was coming down that it would definitely be something that he'd like to see. So I contacted the vicar again, a lovely guy called Matthew, very friendly, very helpful. It is difficult because they're in a private spot, so you do have to make the arrangements to go and see him. But Matthew has a very good approach. He understands that this is really important history and that people have a right to see him. But we had a great time trying to pick out the inscriptions, admiring the form and the shape of the stones, and just having sort of 3 of them to spend as much time with as we wanted, in a really beautiful setting. So we're gonna have a look at those stones today, and just sort of we're going to talk about more of our experience of being there, and some general thoughts about inscribed stones. And in future we'll do some detailed videos about the inscriptions themselves and the people we might think are being described, and what alphabets and letters they used in order to do that.
Maybe even a go on the Bardic code as well.
Absolutely, yeah. We'll have a go at the Bardic code as well.
Excellent. All right. Okay, so enjoy. This was the first one we went to go and see, wasn't it, Pete? The one it was in a far left corner, just against the fence there.
It's funny how sort of unassuming they look, isn't it? When you first go in, you sort of go, oh, what's that? I mean, what was your initial reaction walking into that garden?
Well, I wasn't expecting. What I was expecting was there to be more of a display made about them. They've been preserved by someone historically, but the interest hasn't continued in much, and that does show somewhat. By it, when we were walking up by it, and I saw there's a stone there with some ancient writing on it, and it immediately did impress on me that there's something important here. If that makes sense.
We're not talking like Margam Stone Museum, are we? Or
this is it.
Lamwit Major. It's very different, isn't it? I think the 3 stones were, one of them was local, definitely found it in the town Tavistock, and I think the other 2 were bought from Buckland Monachorum, which isn't too far off, as they were discovered. What I found when I first went there as well is it's quite a big garden, isn't it? And there's sort of two tucked down the bottom that you sort of you point out as you walk in, and you think, oh right, okay. And then there's an absolutely whopping one half hidden in a yew tree. And in fact, you know what you're saying about the interest in it's very interesting, but very double interesting. Because that one, Matthew actually he was very kind. He got out his loppers and started hacking back the yew tree so I could read the inscription when I first went there. But yeah, it just shows that it's not they were put there to be preserved.
Yes.
But it's not like they were put in a place of preservation, like a museum or a church or something like that, where there is a continuation of effort to preserve in that sense. And this is no knock against the current caretakers of the stone either. This is just something that happens over time, you know. Mrs. Bray, who got the first two put in there, she was the widow of an antiquarian who then married the vicar of Tavistock, and she had two of the stones placed there by her husband. And she was very much interested in keeping these safe and preserved. I believe one of them was found as a lintel of a blacksmith's house on his front door or something like that. They weren't being loved where they were. So it was a good move to get them where they were. And I think the last one, or the one in Tavistock, whether it was the last one or not, I'm not sure, was a paving slab. They were doing some renovations in the town, and as they lifted it, they saw the writing on the other side, which, yeah, I know, but rather contrarily, it could have been the fact that it was laid upside down that preserved the writing for so long. But I'm glad we know where it is now, and now every time I look through the granite paving of Tavistock, I wonder how many more might have something written on them underneath.
Indeed. We got to be grateful for places like this who do hold them, you know, to you know, they are keeping them out of harm's way in that way, that, you know, they're not being used in a utilitarian sort of,
absolutely,
you know, or you know, these days they wouldn't be at all, they'd be thrown away. But this is a step up from that. But what impressed on me is that will and that instinct to keep them preserved, but you know, like with Mrs. Bray, comes from a general enthusiasm for antiquarian, you know, pursuits at the time. And I guess that you know, that antiquarian pursuit for or interest in these stones has gone up and down over the years.
Absolutely, it comes in and out of fashion, doesn't it?
Comes in and out of fashion, and setting up a stone museum, you know, isn't always on the first of everybody's priority list, and it's just getting around to doing these. So we need, you know, authorities to take these seriously, I think. And if they won't do that unless we, you know, there's enough of us impressing on the importance and antiquity of them, you know, because that's not presented to you when you visit places like this. It's sort of, oh, there's some stones and some more scribbles on it. It's like,
absolutely. I mean, I went to secondary school in this town. I had no idea they were there, and I knew loads about. You know, we're told quite a lot about the history of the town. It's a very historic town, but with lots of beautiful features. But these are probably some of the oldest. They are, in fact, probably the oldest evidence of settlement in the town. And
incredible.
I mean, one of them is from Tavistock, but no mention at all. It's worth noting as well that the parish, and I spoke with Matthew the vicar about this, they want to get them somewhere where the public can view them, which I think is great.
That's great.
And they want to make sure that they are safe and protected from the elements when they do that. The National Trust in Buckland have tried to dibs on a couple of them, but I don't think people should be paying to see these things. I think they should be publicly viewable. So I think, as Tavistock has stayed as a home for them, keeping them safe for so long, that possibly Tavistock should stay as a safe place for them. But as I say, definitely somewhere where they are undercover. and protected from the elements, and freely available for people to visit as well.
Absolutely, yeah.
So we can hope, we'll keep you updated on that if I hear any more about the movement of these stones. It's got to be an expensive enterprise to move several tons of granite. You got to be very careful as well as not damaging them. It won't be cheap and it won't be easy, and it's something that you got to do very carefully. But it is just a shame that they are currently in this private setting, and as you say, doesn't have that interest around them that maybe they once had. So should we have a look at me picking out the inscription?
Hit play.
So if you're worried about me damaging these stones at all, they're made out of solid granite, and I was using about 1 stick of chalk per inscription. The granite would just eat the chalk away at a rate of knots. There was also several cases where we could see chalk still left in from previous visits. And also, it rained pretty heavily a couple of days after, so there's probably no trace of the chalk left. Yeah. And I imagine that the acidic rain of the area does a lot more damage than any chalk would as well.
Yeah, there's another half.
Let's get you off there.
Yeah, so this one was buried a bit deeper, wasn't it? I don't think the full inscription is visible.
No.
We had to pick some of the ivy off it. Ivy would do tremendous damage to the stone, so I'm glad we were there just to pick off those little runners that were heading up as well. I think we've got, on that Dartmoor Walks book, there's an illustration of this one which shows the full inscription, so we might go have a look at that in a minute as well.
You've got a horizontal eye on that one. Yeah. And then
this stone as well also had this beautiful niche in, which I think I'll mention in a minute.
Like maybe a name like Sabine or
God, the mason did a good job on that S as well, didn't he?
Yeah.
Lovely rounded.
Yeah. Very well executed. We've seen so many forms and shapes which are so commensurate throughout all of these British stones, whether you find them in Wales or you find them in, the west of England, south
Scotland.
Whatever this is, this was here first. Right.
There is
That's what I think.
continuity of quite a few forms and characters, which is quite impressive.
Around it.
Yeah, I saw an illustration from the stones from near Hadrian's Wall, dated to the same period, and it looked identical in letter forms to the things we've been looking at in the West Country.
Yeah.
For a minute, I even thought it was something that we'd seen, and before I read the inscription on the bottom,
Yeah.
So I think what I mentioned about the niche is that the niche is generally thought to have come later as a sort of part of. People say about Christianizing the monument, but I mean I'm pretty convinced, and even mainstream accept these are probably Christian monuments already.
Yeah.
But what's interesting, and other antiquarians have noted, is that the letters on the top are actually squished in around the niche. Which suggests that the niche was there first, which is pretty interesting. It could even be contemporary with the stone, with the inscription, sorry. Or maybe it was there beforehand. Maybe it was an ancient standing stone, which had a niche put in it, and then the inscription came later. But I think it would be dangerous to assume it was something added after the inscription, because that's not really what the evidence suggests, I think.
No, I don't think it's a strong argument, really.
This stone had a great form as well, didn't it? Real anthropomorphic human size, as broad as your shoulders, as high as someone, 5'10", something like that. Lovely shape to it.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm beginning to wonder how much that was intentional to kind of give a anthropomorphic kind of feel to it, especially if you're exonerating and remembering real people. It adds a kind of spiritual dimension to it, doesn't it?
Yeah. Absolutely. Which
is interesting.
So it's this name Sabini, like Sabine, the Latin name.
Yeah.
They haven't even, they've shown the niche there, but but I don't think they've really shown how much those letters are squeezed in. I think they've given it a bit of extra space. They really are squeezed in against the edge of the stone and the edge and the niche that's in the middle there.
Yeah.
I think we've got a couple of ideas about the name. Generally, the only thing that's thrown out is the suggestion that the Mac is of Irish influence. Like you get mab or map in Welsh.
Yeah.
But we already have Philly written on the stone in Latin, meaning son of. So I'm not really sure about that. It's an interesting one.
So that's the what you usually presented with is that the Mac is Irish. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, that's something that is thrown out, but I don't think it's not. It's certainly not. Certainly not fact. It's a suggestion that's been made.
I think it tends to lean over towards the an Irish influence in terms of presentation of ideas of theories about these stones, aren't they? It's interesting that this one, if it's presented as Irish, doesn't have any Ogham on it. So
it doesn't have any Ogham on it. Exactly. Yeah. This one of the three is the one that really gets my pulse going, just because of the shape of it, the look of it, the niche, the quality of the inscription that's still there. It's a real beautiful stone, isn't it? It's just it's the one that I knew you were drawn to it straight away.
Yes.
And I was the same when I first went there. It's a real beauty. Absolutely fantastic.
It was the sort of size and shape of it, but it was also to do with when I got closer to see the writing on there. It did strike me because although it is quite faded, for some of its stones that you find of contemporary period, it's still quite visible, and that might be to do with the sort of the colouring of the stone versus the colouring of
it could be a number of factors, couldn't it? Really,
absolutely. But it was quite a magic thing to go and see. To see sort of if you that's what I remember seeing immediately at the bottom was when you see it is the inscription at the bottom. It looks it's quite big and striking, isn't it? So
I mean, and that was from my previous visit when I didn't have any chalk, and you can and so that's not even been chalked out, and you can see that there's sort of like that almost like a patina on the uncarved section, which is sort of dulls it, and you can see the brighter letters. I really like that sort of beveled top as well. Reminds me of the Getuadoc stone. It's got sort of a point and then just sort of slopes off slightly to the left.
Doesn't it?
It was absolutely fantastic.
Makes you wonder whether there was a cross or anything on there at the top, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Because it's got that form of the shafts that you saw in Cornwall, that we saw in Cornwall, didn't it? You could imagine a wheel cross on the top of there, or even some sort of decoration.
Yeah. Indeed.
But definitely, probably one of the better preserved we saw in terms of inscription, wasn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. It's up there. It's up there for one of the best preserved. For me.
So unfortunately, you can't quite see the inscription as I didn't have the chalk here. But hopefully you can get the impression of how close that writing is squeezed in there around the size of the niche. Yeah. Which is actually very nicely made as well. That niche. It's like polished, well, not polished at the back, but smoothed at the back. I've only seen one prehistoric monument with anything similar, and that's from a massive standing stone that's in Germany that has a little niche carved into it, which is very similar, which they assume was part of the Christianizing of the monument. But yeah, I've never seen an inscribed stone with anything like that. And I've never seen a standing stone with anything like that. So it's a nice little unique example, this stone. So this is the second stone. Well, I say second, depending on which way you look at them, but it's sort of in the middle of the other two. So we'll go with the second one. It's a bit smaller than the previous one we looked at. As you can see on the top right, there's a bit of iron sticking out of it. It's been used as a gatepost historically. The inscription was very faded on this one, unfortunately. We do have an illustration of the inscription, which we'll look at in a minute. But it was very difficult for me to try and pick out any of the lettering on this one. But this is the stone that gets all the attention. Out of the three of them, this is the one that gets mentioned first. And that is purely because it includes Ogham as well as Latin, or Ogham, however you want to pronounce it, which was also very faded as well, wasn't it?
It was so faded, we couldn't work out where the Ogham was. We couldn't work out where any of the writing was.
Yeah, there were. I mean, we could certainly pick out things where we think it might be here, but it wasn't enough to mark out and to be understood, was it?
Wasn't enough to it wasn't like, you know, with the previous stone we've just looked at, that was, it's like when you were carving the chalk in there. I said to Pete off camera that it was so cool to see see it being revealed as we were going. You know, it was amazing. But with this one, it wasn't the same. There was nothing gettable really. There was a few bits here and there, maybe, you know, but it was, and it has this preference because of the Ogham, which is what we see all the time. The Ogham is the most interesting thing.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a bit of a shame. I mean, the Ogham is fascinating. It is really interesting. You know, it is amazing. And when you have stones with both written on, and you can translate them and get the same inscription basically from both of them, that's really cool. It sort of shows that was the intention. But it means that especially the ones, the stones which only have the Latin or Brythonic names on, become almost secondary to the ones that have Ogham on. And that's a problem when we're talking again about preservation, about generating interest. Frankly, whichever language has on them, its antiquity, its importance is equally the same. Matthew the Vicar told us that some academics had recently visited to do some scanning of the stones, which we thought was great. It was good to see that sort of work was being done. But I believe the project was called the Ogham Stone Project.
yeah, I remember that.
I believe they did scan all three stones, but still, I think, as I say, it's just like it could be a problem towards the appreciation and understanding these monuments. I don't think which language appears on them doesn't divide them as much as you know, doesn't divide them at all. They are still a set of monuments from that period, from that culture, and that religion, you know.
Yes, the conversation of differing cultures comes into this because we see often when presented with an Ogham stone and presented with descriptions for Ogham stones and the culture of origin, said to be Irish exclusively, and therefore evidence of Irish settlement in the area. I did the Fenoni stone in the British Museum quite a while ago. Which I demonstrated can read in Welsh. You know, but it's also got these Ogham or Ogham stripes on the side, which so well, it must be Irish then. But it's worth noting here that none of the stones in Ireland which have Ogham on have any Latinate script or alphabet script on there. So I might be repeating myself, but I think it's worth mentioning here at the time here as well that the stonemasons were most likely priests or druids whose place in society meant that they didn't operate on the same with the same borders. Basically, they had correspondence from between Britain, Ireland, Britain, France, to something recorded by Julius Caesar. Anglesey being a Druid college for, it seems to be like quite a big bit of Western Europe. So these ideas swap over borders a bit more fluidly than you're often presented. Yes,
absolutely. And also, I think just we see very commonly this idea of in the 5th century, after the Roman withdrawal, we are shown maps of Irish flooding into West Wales, Northwest Wales, and into the West Country.
Yes. Yes.
It's very clear from the history that these were repelled by various Brythonic kings. In the case of West Wales, there was marriage alliances, and we can see you can follow the genealogies, how the royal families are related to the Irish royal families as well. But what's interesting is that there still seems to be Brythonic dominance in terms of culture, law, language, because other than this Ogham, there's no trace of Irish culture in Cornwall or West Wales, or there's no, the surviving place names that aren't Welsh in West Wales are Viking. They're not Irish. There isn't that sign of influence, which, as I say, that shows that there is a Brythonic dominance. But in the royal families, there would have been a connection to Ireland still. So, and I think that does adequately show why they might want their names recorded in a multiplicity, of languages. But whether to call it an Irish stone
because it's got Ogham is just
it doesn't quite work that way.
It doesn't work, and the only way you get to that answer through an equation is if you have the Brythonic element downgraded to something which is downgraded to a point of being ineffectual, which is just the inversion of what's actually going on.
And I think really it's only through understanding all aspects of these stones, all languages, even down to the selection of the stone itself and the material it's made of, that we're really going to understand this. And we shouldn't be obsessing over certain details and elevating them above others. I think is risky. Basically, it's risky.
It is.
Yeah. And I think the Irish and Oghamoan influence in Wales and Cornwall has been well talked about and well expanded upon. And now it's a time to have a look at the other aspects, especially the idea of can we read these in Brythonic, Brythonic Welsh, rather than just as Latin or just as Irish. Should we have a look at me struggling through this stone, shall we? So I had some idea of what the inscription was from various antiquarians. I think I'm cross-referencing against my phone there, but often I was just sort of,
this is what you were just pointing
I'd
out,
find something, put a line in it.
But then I can't really see what's going on. No. It's really lost, isn't it? They've got some chalk in there, haven't they?
Alice did well, she spotted a few.
Yeah. And here there's a bit chalk.
Interesting shape, this stone. It had like a flat front and then comes to a point at the back.
Yeah.
Like that, sort of like, I don't know if it's shaped like that.
It's generally like,
well, not like a point, but narrower, the cross section would be like trapezoid.
Something there.
But look, I'm really struggling there to find anything.
Can't see anything.
No, you saw more than I could see.
Yeah.
I had no chance.
Yeah.
So this has got the interesting name. I think it's Jabonus.
Yeah.
Oh, right. Me struggling some more.
Yeah, looks like you found the beginnings of an R there.
Yeah. Sometimes I think I'd found something. You start drawing it out, and it's just like a flaw in the stone or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think this is the one. Dubonus and Enabari, I think, are the two names on it,
Right.
and it has this suggestion of the smith. The word is fabri in Latin, and there's a bit of discussion whether it means like this person made this stone, or whether it's recording like an epithet, like the guy was called Enbari the smith or something like that. For whatever reason, maybe he was a creator, or maybe it's a bit more metaphorical that he forged something. You know, it could have been a political act where he was recorded as the smith or something, or it does literally mean that this stone was made by Enabarus or for Dubonus. So yeah, it's got this name Dubonai, which is very reminds us very much of that Dorset pre-Roman tribe, the Dubonai.
Yeah.
So they've got Nabar there, but I've seen it as Enabar as well.
Right.
Some people have picked it out as, and then you can see this word fabri,
Yeah.
sort of like the modern English fabricate, to make, you know.
Yes.
But as with a lot of these stones, there's very little agreement to A, what is actually written on them, and B, how we should then interpret it.
Yeah.
Often, if you use the Celtic Inscribed Stones project, you'll see that over the course of 150 years, these have been visited periodically by academics. They will do their best to pick up the inscription, and then they will discuss it, and then it sort of gets left for the next one to come back 25 years later and do the same thing. I would hope that with new technology, that more of these things are being scanned, not just for their preservation, because, you know, at least we'll have a preserved image. With a good 3-dimensional scan, we might be able to pick out various things that were being, you know, intentions by the mason that we might not be able to see with a naked eye. But yeah, I really hope in future we can start to discuss these more, and try and come up with some more clear-cut answers about, you know, what's being done. But yeah, just it's a shame that one is so poorly preserved.
It is, and if there's any truth that you can be attributed to that facsimile, that's an awesome looking inscription.
Yes, you know? And you can see the ogham down the side of it there.
Yeah.
I don't know if they've put this sort of big chunk, whether they're suggesting that quite a lot of the stone has been removed at some point, broken.
Could be suggesting that. Yeah, it could be.
At the top there, he's sort of drawn an interesting shape on the flat face, so I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, we definitely couldn't pick out anything like that in terms of the Latin lettering, could we?
Not at all. Real shame.
We'll put a link to this document as well at the bottom of the screen.
Right.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
It's quite hard to get a shot of this one.
Yeah. So that's the shrubs that were cut back. You can see there. This one was absolutely whopping, isn't it?
Naprani Silicon Bevy.
A couple of meters high, possibly.
Right. So I think
there's one here as well.
Yeah. So
God knows how much was underground as well.
We're finding that a lot, aren't we? It's like they really do go much further into the ground a lot of the time.
Oh yeah. Had a really interesting, like, rounded back to it, this one. I do wonder if this was the one used as a paving slab, actually.
Yeah, make the most sense out of it.
Yeah. It was quite thin and say just a bit rounded on the back, but possibly smoothed by people walking on it.
That R you see, that's a cipher that you got like used.
Is that where the leg of the R comes out almost at a right angle? Yeah. We saw a few of those, didn't we?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Over the course of the trip.
Yeah, indeed. indeed. That seems to be another a character which we see continuity with, which is very excited, as well as those the A with the kind of the chevron
triangle bottom, the cross section. Yeah, that's right. Have you got a couple of the photos I sent you there as well, just to show it a bit further back to get a sense of the shape and stuff? So that's one without the. You can sort of just catch the inscription there. That's without chalk. There you go. Yeah. So you can see the U that was hacked back there on the left, on the right, and then the laurel that's taken over on the left. I think the right hand side of that is what had the inscription on, and the left was the back. And I took this photo just to show the sort of almost crooked back to this one. But yeah, it was about at least 2 meters high, and quite an impressive thing. If this was stood out in the open somewhere, it would certainly be visible from quite a way off. I wouldn't be surprised if there was some more, because the inscription was quite small and sort of down to one side of the stone, and I wouldn't be surprised if there was some decoration further up, maybe a cross or something that's been lost over time, because the even the Latin script was pretty shallow. It wasn't very well cut into the stone,
right?
Especially compared to that first one we looked at. But what a thing as well. I mean, it's a shame we can't get the scale quite with this photo, but
no, it doesn't quite.
It's pretty fantastic.
Yeah,
and very different to the. I mean, the first one we looked at was probably sort of in the middle. The Ogham Stone was the smallest, and then this is the biggest. And it's interesting seeing the three of them not side by side, but almost side by side. And I think that's another point worth mentioning, actually, is that this Vicar's Garden in Tavistock is the biggest concentration of 5th and 6th century inscribed stones in the West Country, which is crazy. I mean,
it is. Yeah,
there's a couple of places in Cornwall where you can see a couple of them. There's some places where you can see inscribed. You can see a 5th, 6th century inscribed stone next to something from the 10th century or the 12th century. But the three from this period in one place, outside of Wales and Scotland, this is pretty much the only place in England you can see that, which is crazy to think, really. So I don't know if they understand the parish council in Tavistock understand the value of just as it as a collection. It has a value in that sense as well. Just to make one trip and see 3 of these is just not possible anywhere else in England. So that's a pretty special thing, and I really hope that they understand that and take advantage of it as well. This would be a great way of generating tourism money and visits. It really is part of our local heritage, and considering that me and Adam visited some places with very little 5th, 6th century archaeology, but which had a huge tourist industry generated towards King Arthur. We drive past Camelot this, King Arthur that. In West Devon near Tavistock, there is absolutely zero suggestion of that anywhere. And yet you can go and see 3 6th century inscribed monuments in one spot. I mean,
yeah, exactly.
Talk about hidden gems. I mean, that is just
exactly. When it comes to tourism, use what you've got, because there's people out there with absolutely nothing, and they're
still doing it,
still plotting their flag in the ground.
So that's it. That's an illustration of the inscription. It's very bizarre. We've got two backwards ends on it.
Yeah.
We've got that R you mentioned. We've got the A's. I have no idea what's going on in the beginning of. Is that meant to be Philly?
Oh, what at the top here?
Yeah.
Yeah, it kind of it could be that, couldn't it? They're saying it is.
Yeah.
It doesn't 100%. It looks like it could be it, but on the that's from the facsimile anyway. So it's,
yeah, absolutely. Even then, facsimile can
lead you astray. They haven't
absolutely.
written this R hasn't. They haven't got the kick in it, which is
no, they don't. No.
So this is what I mean with being careful if you ever want to look at these stones with the facsimiles. They're great to work from, especially if you're going to go with some chalk to kind of sort of have a half an idea of what you're looking for. But really, they're not anything to go by in terms of a kind of reference for fact. Not at all. They're not very. They're quite flimsy.
Yeah,
that's all right.
Oh, I'm just reading here that this one was used as a bridge over a river.
Oh right, okay.
Which is it happens quite a lot actually, because we have these in Devon and Cornwall. For those who visit will know we have these things called clapper bridges, where you basically get one great chunk of granite and lay it flat over the river. Sometimes you can do it with intermediate pylons, and we make these long clapper bridges, but sometimes they do very simple ones, which is just putting a single block straight over. And because these things are already ideally size and shape for that sort of thing, there's quite a few in Devon and Cornwall that have been used for this function before being rescued. And gate posts as well. That's the other way they end up being used.
I just want to mention this first stone again, the second stone that we did.
Yeah, sure, yeah.
Top stone on here, because let's assume that. I mean, when was this written? What year was this written?
Oh, 1910, is it, or something like
1910. So,
well, no, don't take my word for it.
Okay. It doesn't have a date on.
I have a feeling it's early 20th century. It could be late 19th century. Not quite sure.
Roughly 120 years, something like that.
Yeah.
So 120 years ago, let's assume that the whoever did this etching and did this facsimile could see a lot more than we can today.
Yeah.
So in 120 years, we've gone from being able to see this to seeing Naffle. So this, I guess, a big motivation for making these sorts of videos is to raise awareness of them. And if anybody's watching who can do anything about possibly housing some stones, I don't know how you go about it. I don't know who's got the rights to it, but we need to do something. We need to do something to take care of these things.
Yeah, I mean, keep an eye on, if you're a parishioner of the parish, you have a right to talk to your priest and to the local parish authority about, just even if you just make an inquiry, what's happening. I'd like to be informed if anything changes. Is there going to be public debates about this? That's one way. It's just to keep aware, keep your ear down to the ground, because often these things, people wouldn't think about advertising the fact they're going to talk about moving these things or anything like that. They just assume that people aren't interested, or that those who are interested will be in the know.
Exactly.
But often that's not the case. Often, especially amateurs, aren't in on these sort of circles of communication. So yeah, just keep your ear open and ear to the ground, and if anything comes up, and also go and have a look at them as well.
Have a look.
Do what you can. Let's say these are currently private, so you do need to make an appointment. But there are also plenty in West Devon that you can visit, which me and Adam will be doing a couple of videos on soon, which you don't need to pay to go and see. You can just walk right up to them and have a look at them. So and they haven't ended up in the British Museum yet. So yeah, fab.
Excellent. Well, we've seen a fair few stones on this trip, so strap in. We've got
absolutely. Yeah,
we've got some interesting ones for you.
Could you just scroll up to the Fanoni stone again?
Oh yeah,
and maybe you can just edit I mean, you can cut this up and edit
Yeah.
however you want.
There we go.
Yeah, so they've got here under Fardel stones. I think it was found in Fardel, East Devon. I could be wrong about that. But Adam's done a video on this. We just mentioned it just now. This is, as far as we know, one of the few inscribed stones that is in any museum. But it's in the British Museum in particular. It's not in its home in Devon anymore. And again, I think part of the reason is because it's got Irish alphabet on it.
Yeah.
And this is part of the reason that it's been selected. It could have been to do with who found it, when they found it, and their choice of donating it to the museum, possibly. But I think part of the main reason is because it demonstrates the bilingual nature of the stone has been the important thing.
Yeah.
Which is very interesting if you're talking even if you're just thinking about museum pieces. We definitely saw pieces in the West Country which would be of far greater interest to museum goers as a piece of sculpture.
No, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Precisely.
Some incredible pieces of artwork with fascinating inscriptions and decorations, and also repeated evidence of repeated use for various functions, you know. So it is curious that, again, that we see a preference towards these to the Ogham stones.
Yes. You know, any finds which are made, it's never considered that it could be British. You know, and when we talk about other sorts of artifacts, and we're seeing that again here with preferences with Ogham stones.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which is fascinating, considering the general outlook of British history and academia towards Ireland and Irish studies. You know, this is, you know, British politics is and academia has never been in favour of Ireland. You know,
Ireland,
but strangely enough, especially when it comes to the Celtic nations of Great Britain, Cornwall, Wales, Northern Scotland, the Brythonic countries, suddenly it's all about the Irish influence or all about the Saxon influence.
Yeah, indeed, and
we get this strange diffusionist point of view, as you say, where things have to be come in and introduced rather than being generated on the soil.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's always played down this British element.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
If the Irish get it bad in British politics, then have a look at how the Welsh stuff's treated.
Yeah, exactly.
And you'd be surprised. It's kind of odd. It's an odd situation to have.
Yeah, it really is. It really is, and it's the ancient culture of the island, which isn't exclusive to Wales or Cornwall. Actually,
no, absolutely not.
It's and I would like to mention about Scotland. You know, there's the big Gaelic, the instinct to promote Gaelic culture there, which is great. You know, in the western part of Scotland, that's definitely true, that the Gaels of the you know, descendants.
Absolutely,
of the Gaels, but in the south and the east part of the island, the east, you know, definitely the south, the border country is Brythonic.
Absolutely, yeah.
And the genetics reflect that as well. And there's no effort to kind of find a continuity between the border country, Cumbria, Strathclyde, the old areas of Reged, all of these
Godolphin,
all of the Godolphin, the old men of the Old North. These are British territories with descendants of British people living there today, who have had their culture completely wiped from them. You know, the Welsh have had a hard enough fight to keep the language and things alive. You know, over here, but there's so many people in Britain who belong somewhat to this British culture. Anyway,
absolutely, the Cumbrian dialect of Brythonic completely vanished and eradicated, despite being, recorded up until something like the 9th or 10th century, still being used, and it's now gone. And also Scotland has some fantastic collections of Brythonic inscribed stones as well.
Yeah.
Equally as good as the ones you find in Wales. Just whether they are, looked after as well as, say, the ones at Margam or Lantwit, I don't know, but they have some great stuff there, which I'd love to get up and see. Yeah, absolutely brilliant. But again, we see that trend of this stuff is maintained in the West, generally speaking.
Yeah.
And if we want to understand this period, we need to stop thinking of Britain as Scotland, Wales, England, and and the Southwest or Cornwall or whatever, and think of it more of it as an east-west sort of, or southeast and west and north divide.
Yeah.
Is more appropriate. And these stones are a good way of doing that, a good way of tracking that, of where the flora of this nation was, especially during the 5th and 6th century, and how they were writing, they were creating stone monuments, they were re-inhabiting towns, re-urbanizing Roman centers. They were importing pottery and ideas and glassware from Byzantine Empire. And this was at a time where they were meant to be grubbing around in their mud huts because the Romans are gone and they didn't know what to do with themselves, which is clearly nonsense. And archaeology, archaeology is coming round to that, and definitely has been moving that way for the last 30 years. But unfortunately, on the ground, so to speak, the general discourse and discussion is just not changed at all. But hopefully, an appreciation of these stones, as I say, some of the oldest Christian monuments in the country, some of the oldest examples of writing, some of the oldest examples of stone sculpture. Let's generate some interest and let's dive into them because they're fascinating, absolutely fascinating.
Yeah, and if anybody in any region of Britain has any locally, you want to come and talk, show pictures of them or whatever, get in contact. We'll showcase anything that you've got.
And we sorry, just to bring up preservation again, Adam, it's not just the stones outside that are the problem, is it? Because as from our visit to Lussley and Wareham, these things were tucked in at the back of the church with chairs stacked against them, tables put in front of them, collecting dust. Might have one line of information about it somewhere, which is amazing considering some of these things are the oldest evidence of Christianity on this church site, spreading back to before Augustine of Canterbury arriving. And yet they're just sort of tucked in at the back of the church. It's just mad. I feel like in another country, if you would, that would be the pride of place. It would be, in the center with a spotlight on it, with a glass case around it, and reams of information about it. But
exactly that.
It's just not the case here.
No, we're being very British about it, aren't we? And very self-deprecating.
Yeah.
Which is a shame. It's a real shame. Shame. We have to reverse that. We have to we have to change that up.
Yeah, and as I say, just referring back to Tavi, I think the biggest collection of 5th, 6th century inscribed stones in England you can see in one place, and they're in a private garden.
Yeah.
And not even public knowledge to the people who live in the town. So yeah, let's hope we can change some minds about that.
Let's hope. Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, we hope you enjoyed that, and please stay tuned.
We will come back to talk about some of the names on these stones at some point.
Yeah, definitely.
And dive that a bit deeper, and as Adam says, maybe even try a bit of reading with Welsh, and we'll see how far we get.
See what we can do. So next time we've got stones. It gets a little bit more symbolic, a little bit more esoteric with the next one. There's very enigmatic and mysterious stones with very curious inscriptions and things on. So we get into a bit more of a symbolic one next time. So stay tuned for that. We've got plenty more coming, so please stay tuned for that too. Thank you very much.
Great. Cheers, folks.
Cheers.